What up? I've seen a lot of videos talking about, farms needing to be saved, and seeing a lot of the research that I've done and looking at the state of farming over the last year or so has really put into perspective kind of what's really going on. And I think as people who are interested in farming, people who want to be homesteaders, people who want to eventually commercially farm, it's our responsibility to kind of look at what's been going on in the world, what's been going on in our country, and understanding that if we continue to move in the direction that we're moving, we will not be able to farm effectively in the future. Most of the farming industry in America is subsidized, right? And subsidies are essentially handouts that make sure that you're able to continue working, given the prices, given, some of the fluctuations that happen as a result of maybe governmental interference, politics, a blight or a pest or something like that can come in and tank the prices. And that's just because, as I stated in an earlier video, the farming market is built around futures, or a stock market type of situation where the price that's set is malleable and it goes up and down depending on what the average price of the producer is to the consumers, or at least to the processors, right? But the issue with that is, once you start to accept subsidies, that means that you're able to continue in bad business practices and not get your stuff together enough to where you don't need the subsidies. And what I mean is this, right? We get angry when tax dollars are thrown away to, let's say, the airlines, or let's say the meat industry, or any of those other commercially funded super large entities that are multi-billion-dollar corporations. We hate when we see them get bailouts. But then we continuously see farmers willingly accepting those same bailouts. And now we're seeing farms close because those bailouts are going away. And what it really exposes is a lack of business savvy, a lack of adaptability as it pertains to, you're not getting a couple of $100,000 or maybe $1 million, depending on the size of your operation, to ensure that you'll still be able to turn a profit, or at least you won't go in the black. But when it comes to these larger corporations, we 100% are on board with them losing their businesses in order to kind of teach them a lesson on how they've been acting and how they've been charging people. Now, don't take this video the wrong way. By no means am I saying that I'm on the side of airlines, corporations, or anything like that. But what I am saying is, if we're going to be honest and say that, hey, we want the big corporations to be accountable, they shouldn't take bailouts, they shouldn't take our tax dollars and give them away, the same thing should be said about farms and the fact that they're also taking our tax dollars and in effect giving it away because they're not doing the business practices to keep it and use it for what it was actually intended for. For a long time, I think commercial farming has gotten the ability to buy name brand, top dollar, top of the line. And I think what happens is they forgot that farming is kind of honestly speaking, farming is one of the last bootstrap types of industries in America. All of the farmers that I know from my hometown, whether they're large scale or small scale, they've pieced together so much of their operation. They've bitten bullets in order to make sure that what they're doing can still be done. And I feel like a lot of today's people are now looking at, I want the John Deere tractor, or I want the blue tractor, the red tractor. I don't use these color pieces of material and equipment because it doesn't jive with me. And it's turned into a situation where the same way people argue over name brands where, well, I'm Nike only, or I'm Adidas only, or I like Under Armour, or I don't like Puma. We're the same way with our equipment when most of the real farmers I know have mismatched pieces of equipment because they got what they could afford, or they got what they could fix. And now these second or third generation farmers who in effect could have easily taken over their parents' or their grandparents' operation and used hand-me-down equipment, learned how to use and work with tools in order to fix said equipment. They've gotten to the idea of, I came in with little to no debt. That gives me room to make my farm or my homestead or my job or my whatever you want to call it, I can make it aesthetic now. And that aesthetic is what's killing the industry. And the producers of this equipment have picked up on the fact that people have chosen sides as it pertains to this equipment, and that's why they have it to where if you touch that equipment to work on it, you void your warranty. Because back in the day, if they didn't guarantee that you were in their camp, and they've done a good job to what I like to call Nikeify their customer base, if they knew that you would go somewhere else or choose a different piece of equipment, they wouldn't be able to get away with this. But because so many of the farmers are dead set on having a specific type of look, a specific camp where they can walk in and I got my Carhartt this and my John Deere that and my Kubota this and my Steel and, you know what I mean, my DeWalt, like they're so big on the name brand, and we're so big and so contractually obligated in our minds to a brand that we're not even doing what's best for us financially. And then now you look up, you're in the red and you can't work on your equipment, so it's going to cost you more money. So now whatever subsidy you are getting that's supposed to just save you for the time being and give you the opportunity to come back and rework your business practices to make it where you won't need a subsidy again, now you've built your business model on the subsidy. And now the equipment prices are going up to match the amount of subsidy you have, because the big industry businesses know that you're getting the subsidy. Why else would they say, well, we're going to raise our prices on these John Deere tractors to match what they're going to call inflation, when it really takes up all of the subsidy money that any one particular farmer could get? Those figures are way too close in amounts for that not to be the case. They understand that the subsidies are going to happen. They know the amount that it's going to be. So they're going to raise their prices to take that from you, put it right back in their pockets, put you in the same position again. And ultimately now they're not going to pay taxes on that, because we know corporations typically don't pay good taxes, if any, and you're still in the red. And I know a lot of y'all are going to be like, well, you don't even own a farm. You don't know what that's like. You don't know what it means to have to basically go with your hand out for a subsidy. And I understand completely, right? Because at this current juncture, I'm about to ask for money. I'm about to put my hand out to say, I don't have money for a home. I don't have $100, $200, $300, $400,000 for a house with land or anything. And I can show that I can afford it. But ultimately, I'm going to be in the red as it pertains to the loans I take. So I completely get that. And I also have done enough research and have enough knowledge to know that farming, in the sense of some of the industries, they hold you hostage with these prices. But at the same time, there's two things and two separations in that, right? Buying John Deere equipment is not the same as being told that the only industry that's going to buy your chickens requires you to have X, Y, and Z for them to buy your chickens. Those are two totally different things. Them saying you need a certain type of pig home or pig house with a certain type of HVAC, and they're going to give you a loan for it, and they're going to give you the equipment, and you owe them X amount of money a month to fit that and pay that off. That's different than saying, hey, there's two tractors here. One's old, one's new. One's a John Deere, the other one's some other brand that I don't really want to know, but they both do similar things. I'm going to buy the most expensive one that's going to put me further in the red, versus saying I'm going to buy the one that I know I can pay off quicker to reduce the amount of debt I have. All that to say, it feels like now that the farming industry isn't necessarily about making sure that they're doing what they need to do to ensure that the policies and things that they're getting are being used for the right things. It seems as if they're jealous that other industries are getting these bailouts and they're not getting it anymore. Almost like a child who's been on a trust fund or who's been in mommy and daddy's pocket, and they've been living riotously, and they've set themselves up to where now they have major bills, but then they get cut off. As a person who's been in business for a long time and been in corporations from multiple levels, business is not fair. The ones with the most make the most. That's literally it. That's why acquisitions happen. And ultimately, I keep saying this over and over again, farmers need to start thinking like businesses, because the less you think like a business, the more you're going to get got. The other piece to understand is farming is not made up of one boardroom of individuals with a CEO or a CFO at the top. There's going to be hundreds, if not thousands, of people who conglomerate together to create the farming industry. That means you're not all going to be able to get a piece of the pie, because you all can't be at the table. So you have to operate as a unit and think what's best for the industry, not what's best for my bottom line right now. And the last piece of that is, because you're a big split group, you're not going to be mommy and daddy's favorite, because it's hundreds and thousands of people who are favorites, versus the one or two people from other industries in other big name positions that could easily go to a politician and say, hey, I'll give you this if you give me that. Do what you can as a farmer to get away from subsidies, or it will kill your farm. The other thing to look at as it pertains to farming business practices and getting away from subsidies, because I know as soon as I said get away from those, a lot of people's nose turned up, is if you look at New Zealand, who is primarily a sheep industry, they're mostly a farming country, not even just like cities and states or whatever. Like their country as a whole is pretty much dead set on farming. They did away with subsidies years ago. And yes, the industry went crazy. Things tanked. People had animals that they couldn't sell. People had things that they had to do in terms of shutting down and getting out of the farming industry as a whole. And then ultimately, farming bounced back because people knew there is no safety net. And that's the whole thing about business. It's the whole thing about a capitalist market. And that's one of the things we love about a capitalist market, aside from the fact that you can make as much money as you want, is there should not be a safety net for you if you are not good at business. It's extremely unfair for people to have to essentially pay out of their taxes for you to be bad at business or for you to figure it out. If you think about people who started restaurants, people who started lawn services and things of that nature, if they're not good and they can't keep a customer, if they don't know marketing, if they don't know how to balance a book, they either lose because they get taxed out because they didn't account for it, or they go red because they're not selling enough, and ultimately they close shop. And we respect the fact that people in this country should be able to start a business, either make money or tank, depending on how good they are at the business they've started. Why should farming get any kind of grace over that? And I know it sounds bad because a lot of people never learned business from the people who passed down farms to them. But unfortunately, you can't be in the business and not learn how to do the business. And the business entails the accounting. The business entails research and development. The business entails all of the things that a lot of us don't take into account when we start businesses. A lot of the most successful Americans are people who have started multiple businesses, learned the business system, whether for good or bad, and used that system to their advantage. And ultimately, I don't see farmers using that system to their advantage. Don't get me wrong. I don't think subsidies are going to stop. I don't think that farmers are going to right size their operations to make sure that they can stay in the black. But to me, the smart person would see the trend, knowing I'm going to get an economic boost at a certain point. Let me make that economic boost a boost rather than a band-aid. Think of how many operations could expand if that subsidy went towards buying new ground or making new opportunity for money to grow. If you think about why businesses do loans and things of that nature, it's to keep money in their pockets so that things can grow. I've talked about secured loans for a long time. Those secured loans are there so that while that money is still in the bank and they're using somebody else's money, the bank money is growing. So if I know I'm going to get a subsidy, if I know I'm entitled to X amount of dollars, whatever governmental streams come with that, they come with that. I've already decided I'm going to take that. If I'm going to get that subsidy, then at the very least, it should go towards making it where I make more money next year, not I'm just good enough to be able to put a zero in my checks and balances or my P&L for the year. Even if it just goes towards marketing, any more money that you put towards marketing is more opportunities you have to sell a product. So ultimately, it would still work in your best interest. But until we get away from the idea that just because we are against the businesses that have taken advantage of us, be it corporations or whatever, it doesn't mean that some of the things that they've executed aren't good things to take and utilize to your advantage. We see how marketing works. We understand how these businesses take in money, they use it for a certain amount of time, and they double it and triple it by different things that they put out. And I feel like a lot of times when it comes to stuff like farming, we're so traditional that we're not adapting to the situation. Or even if it's not traditional, we're not doing our due diligence on the front end to ensure a profitable outcome on the back end. And then we raise prices to make up for our mistakes. We raise prices or we ask for handouts to make up for the fact that we do not have the right mindset to steward what we already have enough to make it where we can expand. And I've also talked about the fact that anything you do in the order that it's supposed to be done according to God's command winds up turning abundance. It's literally everywhere. You plant one tree and you could potentially get a whole orchard from the fruit of that one tree over time. And all you have to do is take care of that one tree. We talk about the different parables in the Bible where the person who had 5 talents, 3 talents, and 1, the 5 and 3 went and did what they needed to do and came back with more. That's the mindset we need to have as it pertains to the land, to the animals, to the business that we have. It needs to be focused on making sure we're doing the right things to put us in position to where we can make an abundance off of what we already have, not sitting and waiting for somebody to give us more so that we can at least keep what we've already put ourselves responsible for. You can't talk about how difficult farming is. You can't talk about how hard it is to be in business as a farmer if you're continuously setting yourself up to take handouts. And again, the comment section is potentially going to be like, hey, you're skipping out on the fact that the businesses are cheating us, and you know the government's kind of screwed us. And I get that. I've acknowledged all of that on multiple videos before. But at the end of the day, that does not negate your responsibility to do what you should do to understand where you need to be financially so that you're not dependent on those things. And I think New Zealand did a great job of that by allowing the capitalist market to play itself out. And even to the point of if we had to import everything in, right? They had to import stuff for a long time until it right-sized itself. And that's the unfortunate reality. We've made ourselves weak. We've made ourselves dependent. And as an industry now, we can't demand any kind of political action. We can't demand any kind of push because we're still suckling at the teat of the government. And to me, that's foolish because the government needs us. It needs people who are farmers. It needs people who want to produce. It needs producers to work. And because you guys are taking these subsidies and you're not putting yourself in position to where now I don't need the government, you're taking these loans from the government with all their strings. And to me, I've never understood, and this has been my last point, I've never understood how people who know an industry can willingly let people who've never been in said industry dictate to them what to do. A lot of people let the USDA make recommendations, but they've never touched the field in terms of actually doing the work in that area. And it's not all of them, but I've seen people who do regenerative ag talk about the recommendations from the USDA and how far behind they are. But yet we take these dollars from these pencil pushers, expecting them to really understand our operation enough to do what is best for our operation. And that's never going to be the case. We know the business. We should know the business. We should know our operation. We should know our land and our animals. And that way, instead of us having our hands out and taking whatever punishment comes with that to make sure that we can keep our doors open, we could be the ones dictating what we need and dictating what they need to do to keep us on their side at least. And that way we're not stuck with some of the craziness that we've seen in the last couple of elections. I'm not making this video to become an enemy of anybody. I'm not making this video to become some kind of, heckler or hater of the farmer, because I love farmers. I love farms. I want to be a farmer, and I want to be a farmer that actually has business sense, though. Like, I don't want to just be a farmer to say I've got on some Carhartt and some John Deere and I'm good. Like, I want to be a farmer that changes kind of the perception of farmers as just these people who make a bunch of noise on one end and don't really follow through on the other end. And the unfortunate reality is, because of the lack of awareness that farmers have seemingly had, not only in how what they've done and have allowed to be done has affected the health of the nation in terms of actual health, but also the health of the economy, while simultaneously they point the finger at other entities that do the same thing that they do. The hypocrisy is it's unbelievable.